Apple made the announcement that they're going to use OpenAI. Do you have a perspective on it? Are you allowed to share a perspective on it? If the answer is like, no, I don't want to go there, that's cool too. But like, I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to how like this landscape is changing before our eyes, and people are partners, they're competitors, they're frenemies, and we're all kind of navigating and figuring this out. But I think it's a great deal. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be successful.
Are you a little surprised that they're not trying to build their own?
I'm sure they are.
Yeah. You think like maybe this is like kind of like the Uber Google thing where for a while they used Google Maps as their backend and then now they use Uber Maps.
Maybe. I think every company is still trying to figure that out. I know at Salesforce, right, we launched initially our Einstein platform last year for generative AI. We launched with OpenAI as our initial partner.
Yeah.
Now we have a full ecosystem of partners from Google to Anthropic to AWS, and we have our own models. And so I think it's very early, and it's wise to hedge your bets.
Isn't it crazy though, like how much like overlap there is in the Venn diagram? Like even just like seeing these deals get done with Salesforce or with Apple, whoever it is, it's like, hey, like we're going to use you. But by the way, like depending on how these models evolve, like no promises, like could go somewhere else. And then they're like, hey, no problem. Like the vendors are like, no worries, Then you're like, oh, and by the way, we're also like developing, like the fact that not only is there so much vendor choice, but for large organizations like Salesforce, it's also your own choice is pretty crazy. Like that feels, I don't know, is there precedent for that?
I do think so. I mean, I think that models are getting commoditized. And people know that. And Apple also talked about models that run locally on the device. We're developing some of those as well. I think that Facebook's decision, Meta's decision to open source Llama, and now we are at Llama 3 last year. I mean, it really changed the whole dynamic of the model layer. And I know at Salesforce, like we see different size models being used for different tasks. And the value that Salesforce can provide, in addition to having our own pre-trained models, is to be able to route the right work to the right model.
Yeah. It's pretty insane. Do you report to Mark?
I don't. I report to David Schmeier, our CPO.
And are you are you the public spokesperson de facto for most things AI strategy at Salesforce now?
I would say that. I think Mark does a fair bit of speaking himself.
Well, he's the public persona of most things Salesforce related. But like, I see you like some of the things that you're doing, it's insane. It's got to be really cool. It's just got to be really freaking cool.
I feel like I have one of the most fun jobs at Salesforce.
Can I ask you maybe on the personal side? Like we were just saying, like, look, it's hard to like do a podcast for you because like duty calls and Mark will be like, you got to go somewhere. How do you manage your life when you have a job that's so important? Like, I guess, how do you organize any predictability into your life when like you got shit going on?
I think that being an entrepreneur.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay.
Being an entrepreneur, and I was one for 11 years, it prepares you for life. It teaches you how to hyper prioritize, how to just really maximize your time at all times, both when you're doing work stuff as well as when you're doing personal stuff. And so I feel like for me, and I know so many other ex-founders who are here at Salesforce, as crazy as it gets on Salesforce's busiest day, it's nothing like being at a startup when you're worried about making payroll. And I think it's really, really good practice and discipline for optimizing your life.
I think that's well said. One of the things that through all my work studying you for this was like one of the very obvious things that stood out to me was like, I just felt like you work really hard. And not now, not then, like always. Is that would you consider that fair?
I would. I think I've gotten...
Is that like, I'm kind of like, no one said that explicitly, just through your tone and the way that you've talked about things.
I think I've gotten better about working smarter also. But I do think that now with the benefit of hindsight and more of a reality check, working with more people, I do think that I have worked really hard in my career. But in the moment, especially when I was the founder and CEO of Hearsay, I didn't realize how much more I was working than other people. I just assumed everybody worked that hard.
You did?
I did.
Because everybody in your company worked that hard, basically?
A lot of people in my company worked that hard. And then some people who felt, that I had friction with, I didn't realize at the time it was because I had, frankly, unrealistic expectations for how much they should work.
And can you quantify work hard?
It's not like
By the way, I'm not like fetishizing it. Like, it's not like I'm genuinely more just like, yeah, what does that mean in your mind?
So first of all, I'm really glad you brought that up because we shouldn't fetishize it because I burned out completely from doing that.
Did you?
After 11 years. That's why I left my company from an operating role standpoint was it was just too much for too long. But I will say, in terms of your initial question about quantifying it, it's really about this need almost that I had to get through my list and not rest each day until I was done. So if I'd hosted a customer dinner that went super late, I would not go to sleep until I had sent a follow-up email to every single customer and prospect and logged every conversation in CRM, which of course was Salesforce. Right? That's a little crazy now. I realize it now. At the time, I just thought to myself, I rationalized, like, how can you wait? There's just this incredible sense of urgency and that this fear that I would lose some of that context if I didn't get it down right away.
Do you think that fear was unfounded?
I don't know. I think that when you're starting out as a small company, all the odds are against you and you're like fighting against inertia.
Right.
You're fighting to kind of break through the noise to get the customer's attention, to convince them to give you a chance. And I felt like a lot of the customers, I'm still friends with many of them today, they appreciated that hustle from me and from the early team.
In many ways, like, it is those little things. And those little things add up to build a company. But those little things also add up to, in some ways, like, ruin you.
That's right. It's like not scalable or sustainable, but it's right for that moment. And it's that old, like, trite saying that what gets you from point A to point B won't get you from point B to point C.
Yeah.
Right? But at that moment, during the A to B years, that was exactly what I needed to develop my hustle and what we needed for Hearsay to scale.
Yeah. Do you think if you were, like, again, to my point on, it's kind of the job that needed to be done at the time, with hindsight, and I don't know like what burnout meant for you in that specific situation, but with hindsight, could you have done it differently?
I think what I learned was, I've made so many mistakes.
Let's just say, God forbid you left Salesforce at some point. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but at some point you go like, Mark, I got to go do another one. Would you do it differently?
Of course.
You would?
Yeah, there's some things that you would do the same, some things you do differently.
Maybe like around this idea of work.
I think the hardest part is that when you're in the moment, you don't know how to turn it off, right? And because you don't know exactly when point B ends, you don't know you've arrived and it's time to switch gears. Like, that's why it's actually really important to not work too hard, because you need that time and space, maybe not on a daily basis, maybe not even on a weekly basis, but at least on a monthly basis to check in and ask yourself, are you working hard on the right things? Or are you working hard on things that feel familiar, but actually the most strategic thing or the thing that's going to kill your company, you're ignoring?
Yeah. Do you look back on that being like the company's still around, doing well?
It just got acquired today.
No fucking way. Are you kidding?
No.
It got acquired today?
Today.
What?
Yeah.
Is that announced?
It just hit the newswire an hour ago.
No way. To who?
Yext.
No way. Also, like a lot of Salesforce pedigree inside that company. How much of the original team is there?
There's some people still there. A lot of people have moved on.
Wait.
It's been 15 years.
It's 15 years ago, and today is the day.
Yeah. Last night, to be precise, but it was announced today.
When did you know it was happening?
You know, that's the thing. I've walked down the aisle. We've walked down the aisle with several potential acquirers.
You were like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah. So like I didn't believe until it was finally signed.
And when was it signed? Last night?
Last night, 10 p.m.
Well, wow, I'm glad we're doing that. Like, thanks for not canceling. I mean, I guess, yeah, you kind of, when you woke up this morning, so the feeling that founders have described to me, this is different, but it's similar, like when they IPO, is like that night, you're thrilled, in many ways like relieved. You go public, whatever. And the next day you wake up and you're like, all right, I have a full calendar. Like I still got meetings.
I still have to live my life.
Yeah. How do you feel? Seriously.
I feel good. This is a good home. I mean, as a founder, there's like a million things that run through my head of things that I could have done better.
Really? So you kind of beat yourself up?
Well, I mean, in this like crazy venture world, it's not like the crazy multiple return that I think our VCs expected of us. But I'm really happy and at peace with where we landed.
How much do you care what everybody else thinks about this?
Now, zero.
How does that
36 months ago, a lot. Too much.
36 months ago, meaning like before you had left to come to Salesforce?
Just as I was leaving.
Can you describe that?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you're a founder, especially, first of all, your ego and your identity is completely wrapped up in your company. And it has to be that way, right? That's how you drive and give everything that you've got. But then secondly, you actually do have a fiduciary responsibility and an emotional connection to all of your shareholders, including and especially your employees and your investors, your board members.
People that made a bet on you early.
Yeah, everybody.
When they didn't have to.
Exactly. So I cared a lot about what they thought, and as I should, right? It was literally my job to.
Who led the Sequoia and who led it?
Sequoia led our Series A and C. NEA led our Series B.
So you raised 3 rounds.
Pretty much.
And does this in some way, so 36 months ago, I can't believe this. I actually I'm really stoked for you.
Thank you. I actually can't believe it either.
You can't?
No, because when you're in something for so long, it's like.
Does this give you finality?
In a sense, I feel.
Did you feel any guilt? So I just had sorry, I just interrupted you.
No, go for it.
I've interrupted you 5 times now, but I had the Intercom CEO on, which this space obviously, and he left the company and then came back to the company 2 years later. I don't know, just almost like this unfinished business that he had to go finish. I don't know.
I've had those feelings, and there's a lot of guilt around leaving initially and feeling bad for feeling bad. But I think for me, what really helped was having my replacement, my successor, Mike Boese, there in place. He was previously my COO, and he is literally the best possible person who could have continued leading Hearsay. And I've learned so much from him. I had continued to serve on the board as the board chair, and just watching how he operates with class and grace and just laser focus. It's something that, frankly, I wish I had done when I had been the CEO. And so I felt a lot of confidence and peace that he would take the company to a right outcome, which this is.
Can I rewind 36 months ago when you felt that way? Why did you say 36 months ago you definitely cared about? Was it because you didn't have space and time?
Yeah. When you're in the midst of, whenever a founder is thinking of leaving a company, it's almost worse if it's their choice, because there's all these feelings of, who am I without my company, right? After all these years, everybody knows me as the founder and CEO of X. Now I'm not going to be part of X. What will that mean?
Yeah.
What will my employees think? Will they feel like I'm abandoning them? What do my investors think? What will my customers think? Will they understand? So it's just, I think I grappled with all those same questions, and it was really, really hard. And I'm so glad I went through it, because it forced me to answer those questions.
And in hindsight, was all of that worry for naught? Or do you think that it produced a different result that was more positive?
It's such a great question. I think it for sure produced a different result. It resulted in me, I've always liked to write down my thoughts. It helps me think. But it resulted in me publishing that on LinkedIn to explain to people very openly why I was leaving, and why it had nothing to do with the company and everything to do with me and where I was in my mental state and what I wanted to do with my family. I really wanted to have another kid, which I have gone on to do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I think that worry was productive worry.
Yeah. Sometimes I think to myself, why can't I live so much of my life without this worry, you know? And I convince myself that that worry is also the thing that moves the needle in positive ways. It's like the blessing and the curse.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes if it results in an action, yes. Sometimes if it results in, your behavior or a consciousness that wouldn't otherwise be there, like crossing the street, right? I'm trying to foster that worry in my young kids so that they like have healthy sense of worry. But then I think a lot of worry also doesn't serve us if it's not actionable.
Do you think 36 months ago that worry just subsumed you? Like when you say like you reached, your breaking point, do you think that was the root cause of it?
No, I think that worry was a result of me deciding post-breaking point to leave. The breaking point was me feeling like I was at a loss for how to get my company back to 100% growth every year.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was just continuously working harder and harder and harder, but it wasn't getting easier. It was getting harder. And so, but I couldn't see a path.
Yeah. And as someone that I imagine you like to put your thumb on things and like A equals B for you, right? Like your inputs equal a lot of outputs. Those things probably started to feel disassociated for the first time in a way that, again, I imagine you just felt like you didn't have control.
That's right. Yeah, and it's crazy. It was like usually when you push on the input, something comes out, but now it's not, or half as much is coming out. What's going on?
And then you start to ask yourself, like, is it me? Like, am I the reason why this is happening? And it's your company. And right or wrong, that's a terrifying feeling to ask. I think because all the people that you were talking about, that you cared about what they thought about the outcome of the company, ultimately, in the beginning, they were really making a bet on you. So like, there is a lot of intertwining between all of these pieces.
Totally.
Crazy. Well, I'm really happy that today is a good day for a little bit of finality for you and for the team. Like there's a lot of other people that were probably rowing the boat feeling helpless.
Well, I mean, again, it speaks to Mike's leadership. He really got the company into a great direction, and he's been a fantastic leader. He's retained some of our best people. He's brought on new, really awesome people, and most of them are going to stay.
It's awesome. I'm just so... And did you, when you were evaluating, like, first of all, before you came to Salesforce, which, by the way, like, I would normally say doesn't make sense, but makes a ton of sense. It makes a ton of sense. And I will also say, having gotten to know many Salesforce alumni, especially on the go-to-market side, which is like my view, my world, it prints elite operators, prints them. And I will say that that's been surprising to me because most businesses that are category leaders N of 1 companies, I'm not going to say names, but do not have this caliber of people that leave these companies because they don't have to have the operational rigor because the business just kind of goes. So anyway, that was more just commentary on gassing up Salesforce a little bit because it's very impressive. Have you noticed that? You must have noticed that, right?
It's an extraordinary company.
It's amazing.
There's a very strong entrepreneurial spirit here.
So that makes sense to me, like coming from a startup to, how big is sales? 50, 100?
70,000.
70,000 people. It makes like, that's normally I'd be like startup to 70,000 person company, like doesn't make sense, but I get it here.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at my current role, it was very entrepreneurial. There was no centralized AI group.
No, like this is a brand new
before.
thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I came back to the company. I started my career here in my 20s. Did Hearsay for 11 years. Left, took 6 months off, came back to Salesforce December 2020, and took over the Service Cloud, which is the largest business at Salesforce. I used to joke that we should rename the company Serviceforce because it's bigger than Sales Cloud. And then I led that for 2.5 years. And then in the midst of all that was happening in the tech industry, post-pandemic hangover, my team and I saw what was happening with generative AI. This is before the release of ChatGPT. And we just started playing around with it, prototyping it with customers like Gucci. And it turned into this really amazing thing that we then productized and turned into a brand new team and organization within Salesforce. So it's very entrepreneurial.
And I will give Mark and the team credit to bring you in to run the largest business within Salesforce. When I imagine the largest team you've ever run was at Hearsay.
Yeah.
And that was what, 150 people?
400.
400. Okay, how big?
But not a $5 billion revenue business, now $8 billion.
Right.
A year.
Right. And not the at least 1,000 or like, it's not even, I mean, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Like when they approached you or you approached them or whatever, right? Like you're boomeranging back. So there's some connective tissue. But like at first you both must have been like, is like.
Yeah. I asked, I said, are you sure? I've never run anything even close to remotely this big. And B, I don't really know very much about customer support other than having built the customer support function at Hearsay.
And like, what was the rationale? Like, what did they say?
They said, we want someone who is a great leader and who's entrepreneurial.
How like not big company of them.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
You know?
Yeah.
And how long did you run the Service Club? Almost 3 years? And like, did you experience that feeling that we were just describing then too of like, okay, it's different because at a startup, there's an existential nature to the work where like, you're not totally sure if this thing's going to be around in a couple of years. Here, obviously that's not the case, but did you have that same feeling of like, am I in over my head?
It's different. I mean, I'm wired to always be paranoid. And so I think I just brought that into the team. And the competition, especially now with AI, everyone's trying to compete against Salesforce. We're the market leader in every space we play in. So you kind of have to have that healthy dose of paranoia. You can't rest on your laurels, and you constantly have to be reinventing and disrupting yourself.
Where do you think where do you think that paranoia came from?
Entrepreneurship.
You think so? You don't think there was something before that? Maybe you don't think that you were predisposed to that quality that then led you to want to go into entrepreneurship?
Probably. I mean, I'm an immigrant, so probably that immigrant hustle, like having come from very little, that like was infused in me, and then it was definitely sharpened.
When did you move here?
When I was 4.
From?
Hong Kong.
Like, I think that probably had something to do with it.
Yeah, for sure.
You know? Like, when you come here without much, you know, new country.
But that's less of a paranoia, because paranoia is like kind of exaggerated fear of something that might not be there, versus that was actual fear based on like reality.
Huh. That's actually a really good description of paranoia. Do you look for people on your team now that have that?
I think paranoia might be too extreme. I think people who are hungry.
Okay, the nice way of saying it is detail oriented.
It might not even be detail oriented. It's having hunger and urgency and really caring.
Huh. Do you feel like you've had to change what you look for at Salesforce versus what you would look for at Hearsay?
There's some common attributes in terms of leadership and culture and ownership. But yeah, when you're operating at scale, it requires a different skill set. It's a skill set that I've had to learn.
But what's interesting is it didn't for you. I mean, like, yeah, you learned it, meaning seemingly the bet that they made on you was not experience running a giant business at scale. It was a bunch of these intangibles that were kind of circling around. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, but you could say that of any leader, right? Any leader of a large organization started off with a smaller organization. At some point, someone decides that this person is ready to run a team that's 2x, 3x, 10x what they previously ran. They have to take that leap of faith at some point.
Yeah. You moved to Chicago, right?
Yeah.
And when did you start feeling like, do you remember moving?
Yeah.
You do? You have memories of that?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, it was a struggling immigrant family. My parents were always working. They had odd and end jobs, and I was a latchkey kid. And so, yeah, I very much remember that immigrant upbringing.
And like this idea of hard work makes complete sense to me now. By the way, like that's obviously where it comes from. I mean, you watched your parents work multiple jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Like, kind of like your comment on you didn't know any other way being at Hearsay. It's not that different from like you didn't know any other way in your own household.
100%.
Like that's how it was. You know? Yeah. Do you feel like you've transferred different worries from then until now? Meaning, are the worries that you have now just the same feeling, but bigger scale? Holy shit, we're like above the plains here.
I know.
It's
pretty cool, right?
This is insane. Is this the tallest point in the city?
This is the tallest point west of the Mississippi.
What? On this floor too, because this is the top floor?
It's top floor.
This is the tallest point. You're kidding me. That's incredible.
I know. It's pretty awesome.
We're literally above the plains. Yeah. Anyway, do you feel the same internally when you come to work today? It's different sets of problems, but do they feel the same to you?
As what?
Like, I got to get through this list. I gotta achieve. I have to go achieve.
Oh, no. I've gone through a lot of therapy and executive coaching.
Do you think, I have heard, I don't have kids yet, but I have heard that kids help that. You've had number 2, right?
Yeah, I have 2 kids. My kids have helped a lot. I think a lot of this, I was beaten out of me as I was going through Hearsay.
Beaten out of you?
Yeah. Because at some point in your career, you realize that you can't win by being the single smartest or hardest working person in the room. You win by getting everybody in the company to be that way. And as your company grows from 5 people to 10 people to 100 to 200, 400, 70,000, the way that manifests, the way that you achieve that goal changes.
Did you feel like you quit? This is something that I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs about, like this idea that, again, I also think we fetishize of like never giving up. But like at some point, it feels to me that most businesses, now you never know, in hindsight you only do, reach a point of maximum leverage. You know?
Yeah, I did quit. I'm totally okay with that. I quit. And it was the right thing for me, and it was the right thing for my family, and actually it was the right thing for my team.
Yeah.
I probably should have quit a little bit sooner.
You think so?
Yeah.
For yourself or for everybody else?
For everybody. But it's kind of like when you have a breakup in a relationship, it always happens like a few months at least later than you wish you had.
Yeah. But you got to go almost to the bitter end.
You do.
Because then there's no doubt.
Exactly.
Otherwise, that maybe you would still be like, should I be running that company?
That's a good point.
You know?
The suffering is required.
The suffering, yeah, exactly. Can I ask, like, how busy is your day now? Like, do you find that you have more meetings or less meetings at Salesforce?
Then Hearsay?
Yeah.
Oh, way more.
Way more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, tell me about that.
I mean, I have more because there's a coordination cost when you have 70,000 people. And it's very important, especially for something like AI that touches every single product, every single department, every single business, to make sure that I'm getting buy-in from people. I'm getting, I'm socializing ideas, that it feels collaborative. So that takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, your day is mostly smoked with meetings.
There are a lot of meetings. And then I also spend a lot of time with our customers.
Totally. But that's not what I was talking about. The meetings I'm talking about are more like internal meetings. When I was with TK from Google, and he was like, yeah, I'm like basically a prisoner of my own calendar. And, like TK's been at big companies basically his entire life. So that's like a pretty normal feeling. I wonder, do you ever feel like, man, I want to go founders get so close. They're still not there because they're the leaders of people that are putting the points on the board, but they get pretty darn close to putting points on the board almost all the time. Do you ever feel like, oh man, am I putting points on the board? I don't know.
I felt like I put a lot of points on the board when we were just starting up this AI group.
Yeah.
It's been a year and a half. And now I know, because I did it at Hearsay, that for it to scale, the way that I define putting a point up on the board is different.
Yeah. Which is what?
Sometimes it involves meetings.
Yeah.
If I can meet with our top sales engineers in the company and activate them as part of, our AI evangelist group, that's putting major points on the board. They can have way more meetings collectively, the thousands of them, than I could and my team could on our own.
Yeah, that's fair. And sorry, your job today is to basically infuse AI across the organization. That's incredibly simplistic.
I'm the GM, CEO of Salesforce AI. So it's everything from research prototypes to product strategy and delivery, all the way to go to market.
Okay, but let's just say AI is electricity. Okay. How is that, maybe in this world, how does that interface with Slack?
So we have AI as a platform that Slack builds on top of our platform.
Got it.
Then each of the Salesforce clouds, the native Salesforce clouds, also has their own AI products. So they're like fans and lamps.
And you dotted line to their orgs, kind of? Or not? Is it completely independent?
We all report to David Schmeier, who's the chief product officer.
Right.
It's a very matrix organization.
Yeah.
When we started the team, I had gone from being the GM of Service Cloud to doing AI. And in the initial incubation, our new centralized team built the sales and service Einstein products. And so they're slowly being reintegrated back into the clouds, but the platform team is still driving quite a bit.
That makes sense. I read somewhere that Salesforce has, again, I read it on the internet, so tell me if this is true.
Don't always believe what you read on the internet.
Exactly. Salesforce deployed 50 AI-powered tools amongst its workforce and reported that these tools have saved employees in excess of 24 years worth of work, or 50,000 hours. Is that right?
I am not personally aware of that stat.
Okay.
I know that my colleague, Juan, who's our CIO, he and his team are all over it, and they've been deploying a number of AI products to our employees across various departments, of course, including our own Salesforce AI products, but also from third-party vendors.
Yeah. And do you find that, like you said, you're spending a lot of time with customers right now? Are we at the point yet where customers are like, all right, I get it. AI is important, but let's talk about some meat and potatoes stuff, kind of our solutions rather than technology?
So first of all, we have hundreds of thousands of customers.
Yeah.
So if you ask me any question about, are you hearing this from? Yes, right. Of course.
Yeah.
There's going to be some customers that fall
That's
into
fair.
that bucket. What I do see is a lot of customers in the hype and frenzy of the last couple of years, what they do is they'll first start off by signing up with OpenAI or with Gemini or whatever. They'll play around with the large language model, and they'll quickly realize that there's hallucinations. It's hard to drive adoption and behavior change in the organization. And then at that point, usually they'll work with us and they'll say, well, how can I turn this on, make it really easy for my sales, service, marketing, and commerce users, and make it so easy that the salesperson or the customer service rep may not even realize they're using advanced RAG and embeddings. Like they have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
All they know is that the customer email gets written for them and the perfect response to the customer chat just pops up, right? And that's what it means to be in the flow of work, and everything automatically grounded in customer data and also personalized to who that user is and what data and workflows that particular user has access to.
Yeah. Can I ask you, there's a commercial, I don't know if it's still on, the McConaughey one. I love it. He's like in a...
He's my favorite coworker.
That's right.
He makes a lot more than me.
That's right. Basically, the gist of it is that your data is not our product. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the consumer internet, everyone who uses all these social media apps and internet apps that we love in our consumer personal lives, their data, their personal data is the product. They are the product. And especially with large language models, if you think about how these large foundation models are trained, they basically sucked in all of the data that's on the internet from Reddit to Wikipedia to X to you name it. And that's how these models are trained. Well, that doesn't really work in the enterprise, right? You can't just vacuum up all of the enterprise data that's in a company and turn that into a large language model. First of all, that wouldn't work. Second of all, it violates all kinds of data privacy and data security, not the least of which because there's different people and different departments within a company that have different access and permissions to varying sets of data. And so it's just bringing that trust-first approach to data and AI. I mean, trust is Salesforce's number one company value and has been since the company started 25 years ago.
Can I ask your take on something? You may not answer it because anybody that gives takes on anything AI related right now is just like usually wrong, and it's like within a few weeks, let alone like a few years.
You're really teeing me up here.
I know, but since GPT-4 was trained in fall of 22, we have spent over $100 billion on Nvidia GPUs collectively as an industry. And there's two schools of thought. The first is, compute is the only real bottleneck to AI progress. And so like the more we spend, the closer we're going to get to AGI. And you see that in some of these foundational model companies continuing to raise money and basically go spend it on Nvidia. Second is that we're hitting a kind of a wall, a data wall, which will slow progress down regardless of how much compute we have. I guess A, do you agree with that framing? And B, do you have a thought on it?
I don't think it's possible for anyone to know right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally, my belief, my hunch is that there are newer, better architectures for models that we haven't seen yet, or that aren't
beyond the transformer architecture.
Yeah, they're not in production yet, and so I don't know if what we currently view as limitations will always be limitations.
But like, doesn't that beg the question? Like, how do you do your job? How do you plan? Like, your planning is years in advance. Like, how do you do that?
It's super hard, but it's something that entrepreneurs have to do every day.
Yeah, but entrepreneurs are planning like. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it's to hold multiple possible scenarios and multiple different time horizons in your head and plan and execute against each of those in parallel every day. Right? That is what it is. And that's the kind of thinking that I run Salesforce AI with. We call it Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Horizon 1 is what's the here and now? How can we change probably incrementally the workflows that today's salespeople, today's customer service reps, today's marketing and commerce managers, how they work, and make it really turnkey, while at the same time building out Horizon 2, which is our platform, and letting our customers customize all of that in no code. We're famous for our no code builders, and ISVs and foster more partners. And then Horizon 3 is this like ongoing set of experiments, any of which could become the next thing, right? And we just don't know which one. And so we have to keep prototyping and keep trying.
You were just in FAIR, by the way, FAIR. Like, it's hard. It's really hard.
It's hard, but you can do it. And you put different people in those different horizons, right? It's like literally a different, not just skill set, but like different way that someone is wired.
Tell me more.
Well, just like it's like Horizon 3, it's like the people who are the most entrepreneurial, the most far out there, versus Horizon 1, it's the people who are most focused on operating plans and traditional execution, right? 3 release a year roadmap.
And I would imagine more of the research and researchers are backloaded into Horizon 3.
Completely.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Our chief AI, chief
AI research officer?
Our chief research scientist,
okay,
Silvio, Savarese, and I, we have a new joint venture. It's called our Frontier AI Group. And it's a bunch of people from his team, a bunch of people from the traditional product management team. We've brought them together, and we are constantly prototyping different ideas with customers. And some of them don't work out, and we learn a ton. Some of them do, and they graduate into our core product roadmap. But that's what allows us to go super fast.
And which horizon would you put that into?
That's Horizon 3.
Yeah.
With some of the experiments graduating into Horizons 1 and 2.
That makes sense. You were just in France?
Yeah, for Vivatech.
Did you meet with Macron?
Yeah, he hosted a bunch of us entrepreneurs at...
That was a bit cool.
Oh, it was amazing. It was so beautiful.
Where was it? At the...
Yeah, at the Elysee. At the Elysee.
Yeah. And did you notice a different... This is just you talking. A tone from how they think about AI versus us, more like nationally? Like, did you get a sense, or is it the same thing?
It was different in the sense that in America, it goes without saying that we are in the pole position for AI. In other countries, that it doesn't go without saying. And so he said it. And I think that this idea of sovereign AI and countries wanting to own their own homegrown systems that are trained on local data and led by startups that are locally funded and grown. I think that that's what a number of countries are trying to do, including France.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's great, right? Salesforce, we love that. We have an open model layer. And so customers can choose from any number of models in our ecosystem, as well as bring their own. And so Mistral, which is, of course, the leading French model company, they're part of our ecosystem. In fact, we were early investors.
You're investors in a lot of things. We're co-investors in a few things, actually, including Together AI, which I'm pretty sure.
I don't know.
Hopefully. If not,
can you just cut that? Because I actually don't know, but I feel
I'm
bad.
pretty sure.
If we are, then I don't want to say that I don't know.
Yeah.
Our Salesforce Ventures team is prolific.
You guys are super active.
Yeah, and it's awesome, right? We love working with Mistral and Anthropic and Cohere and Hugging Face and Runway.
How are you learning? How are you keeping up with this?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I learn every day from our amazing researchers and engineers and product managers. We're all reading and sharing things on Slack. It's a really great way to connect if you haven't tried that out.
Yeah.
And I use generative AI to help me keep tabs on
an example?
Great podcasts. Yeah, so I have a list of 20 podcasts and a few different terms for research papers that I like to keep tabs on. And every week, I send that into, I actually have my EA do it. She puts it into Claude, actually, and she summarizes all of it for me. And then of that list, usually I'll pick, the top 3 where I want to either watch or read the full transcript, not just a summary.
And it's searching through the transcript for the keywords that you're prompting it with?
No, it is. I have podcasts that I like to listen to.
Yeah.
And then it's beyond that, it's searching keywords, just using like Google search. And then we feed all of that in to be summarized. And then I read through those summaries, share it with my team, and then I'll pick the 3 that are the most interesting to me to go deep.
It's like your own AI daily digest newsletter.
Yeah, it's personalized to what's important to me. And then if I'm even more interested, if there's a particular paper, like recently there was one on knowledge graph, then I'll actually meet with people either in the company or externally to go even deeper.
And do you have any on the like personal side that you use it for?
I have not used it personally yet. I actually enjoy listening to podcasts personally.
Can I give you one that I like?
Sure.
My favorite one is I put my favorite 7 or 8 movies, and I'll tell ChatGPT or Claude, give me a list of 50. I don't like old movies, so please make it past the year 1995. For some people, that's going to be old. For some, it's not. I only want it above a certain rating threshold on Rotten Tomato or IMDb. And the list is like very broad. Like, it is amazing. It is amazing. All those arguments that you have with your partner about what are we going to watch tonight, just boom, go through that list.
You just disintermediated Netflix's recommendation engine.
Yeah. I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that stuff coming up.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
Sure. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. I sincerely hope that you rev your podcast back up again.
I'm going to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I have the scheduling tips from you and how to be consistent.
Yeah. Are you hiring?
Yes.
What are you hiring for?
All kinds of people.
Any key roles that you want to shout out?
We've got some openings for product managers on the Frontier AI team that I mentioned earlier, that joint venture between the research group and the traditional product group, and then also on the go-to-market side.
When you hear the word grit, what do you think of?
I guess I equate it with what we've been discussing today, with this willingness and almost like this innate desire to push through hard work and hard things in pursuit of an opportunity or a worthy outcome.
And by the way, congrats on like today. That's super cool.
Thank you.
You must have either gotten the best or worst night of your sleep of your life last night. Hopefully it was the best.
Both.
So I'm just like, it's cool to see people like you who are great entrepreneurs deciding to come and shake things up at 70,000 person companies. And it's cool to see companies of this significance deciding to give the baton to like doers and movers and shakers. And yeah, that's just really cool. That gives me hope. That's really cool.
Well, it helps that our CEO is quite an entrepreneur himself.
Yeah, also, like, that he's still all over it.
He's tireless.
How many founders, seriously, how many founders are there that still are, that have a company of this significance that are still driving as the CEO? Like,
I've had the fortune of working with some really amazing founders. Mark, Howard Schultz.
are you still on the board of Starbucks?
I'm not. I stepped off last
You
year.
were there for 12 years, weren't you?
Yeah.
You were 31 years old when you joined the board of Starbucks.
29.
29? You took Sheryl Sandberg's seat, didn't you?
She had stepped off and she nominated me.
That's insane.
I know.
How cool was that?
It was phenomenal.
What do you see as the similarities between those two, Mark and Howard?
I think it's just it's a love and it's a calling and it's this amazing community and movement that's created. It's not just a company, it's an entire community.
Can I close with what's one lesson that each of them that you're like, that was a sick lesson of leadership that each of those guys have instilled in you?
There's so many.
Question?
I mean, we could be here for 3 hours. I guess, I mean, there's so many leadership lessons from Howard, but I'd say that the biggest one he'd always talk about is in every conversation that you have or every decision that you make, imagine that there's 2 additional people in the room, like sitting there watching you and counting on you. And one is the customer, and one is the Starbucks partner, which is what we call, or what Starbucks calls their employees. And ask yourself, would this decision make them proud? And I've really carried that with me.
That's a great one. That's a great one. What about Mark?
Mark, never rest. Always reinvent.
I think that's why you're in this job. Thank you. Thank you, Clara. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.